Welcome to Guide to Feeling Better. Our Guide to Feeling Better provides information to help people recover from mental health and substance use disorders. I'm Sarah White. I'm the director of the Campbell County Drug-Free Alliance, and I will be your host for the day. I am joined by Jess Link. Jess is an LGBTQ community member. And you might be thinking, oh, LGBTQ, I've seen those letters before. What do they stand for? What do they mean? And today, we hopefully will be able to provide you with some definitions so that you can be educated as a community member. So thank you, Jess, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I think what we'll kind of do is almost do like an LGBTQ 101. So what are, I guess, kind of common terms that exist, and then if you could provide some definitions to go along with the terms.
Sure. So LGBTQ, LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIAA, P, it goes on forever. Alphabet soup is what people like to call it a lot because the letters have been changing for years and years. So within at least my understanding, like the last 3 to 5 years, LGBTQ plus is how people say it now, or LGBTQ. And when it used to be LGBT, and that was it, right? So all of those letters, they're constantly changing just to represent any identities that have been more fully fleshed out or more present or prevalent in like the sexual minority community. Do you just want me to go through the alphabet soup?
Yeah, sure. I think the audience is probably most familiar with gay, lesbian, and now transgender, I would say within the past couple of years. But so maybe hit on those three,
okay.
But then also just kind of lay it out and go ahead and give us whatever there is.
Sure. Okay, cool. So let's go through just so I make sure that I hit everybody.
Okay.
We'll start with L, lesbian. So homosexual. Homosexuality, you know, if you don't know what homosexual is, it's someone of the same gender loving another person of that same gender. And I'm using air quotes now, but we'll get to gender in a minute.
Okay.
So L is lesbian, and that is a woman loving a woman. LG, G, gay. Gay, a man loving a man. And gay is kind of an umbrella term or a previously used umbrella term for the queer community or the LGBTQ community. So, and people still use it interchangeably, but it's less PC. It's less accepted now because gay has a connotation of man loving man, right? So like, well, I'm gay. Well, I don't identify as a man. So yes, I can say like, oh, I'm in the gay community or I'm gay, but it's less accepted now. The more acceptable term is LGBTQ or queer. But if you are a gay man, you can still identify as gay because that's a person, not the community.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
So we got L, G, and then B is bisexual or someone who is attracted to either gender. T, transgender. Transgender, the trans community, you may have seen before trans with an asterisk at the end. And that just represents the entire spectrum of transness. So trans just means that you don't trans means that you don't identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. So trans doesn't necessarily mean that you were, that you have gone through a transformation. It means that even without going through the transformation, you can still identify as being trans.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but it doesn't it doesn't uninclude, disclude.
Disclude.
English can be hard. It doesn't not include someone who has, someone who identifies as trans, like a trans woman that has gone through surgeries. That doesn't not include them. It just, it doesn't mean that you have to have a surgery to be valid. So the trans umbrella encompasses anyone that eschews or doesn't identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. So for a very easy example, and I'm a human right in front of you, I was assigned female at birth because of my genitalia, right?
Yes.
Genitals and gender are not the same thing. And people get that confused a lot, and that's okay. Anything that I say today is not meant to be a judgment call. It doesn't mean that you're wrong, or it's not the same thing. So
right.
Genitals don't dictate what clothing you put on your body. Our society can dictate what you put on your body. So I was assigned female at birth. That means that I should be wearing pink. That means that I should be like having long hair. That means that I should be doing all of these things to perform femininity because of what I was assigned at birth. But I do not identify with female. I identify as non-binary, which is under the trans umbrella. So I could identify as a trans person, even though I'm not a trans man, I'm not a trans woman. I am a non-binary person because I eschew gender, or I do what I want. Sometimes I'm very feminine, sometimes I'm very masculine, and that's how I like to present myself. So that was kind of exhaustive.
It was good. It was good. Well, and I think that I think people understand. Like I think I had said this before. I think people understand the G and the L.
Yes.
But I think the T, people get very confused on what that T, the transgender, really means. And it is a very complex word. But I think ultimately what you are saying is you are a human being who just wants to be true to yourself. And if you wake up in the morning and you're feeling more feminine that day, you will dress a little more feminine. If you're waking up on a morning and you're feeling a little more masculine, you're going to do that too. You are just being who you are.
You got it.
Okay. So we have the LGBT.
Yes.
Now Q.
Q. So queer. Everyone that I've ever had ideological discourse with on the word queer, the first thing that they say is, isn't that a bad word? It can be. It can be a bad word. If you are using queer to insult someone, to say that their identity is like sissy or feminine or wrong or, bad, queer, or like ya queer, like if you can use anything as a pejorative, but yes, that once was a slur. Queer now is a more inclusive term to recognize the entire spectrum of the LGBTQ community, because queer touches on sexuality. I can be a queer person and my sexuality is fluid, and I can be genderqueer. So gender also falls under the queer term, because it just means it's a little bit of everything. It's muddled. It's whatever you want. So that queer term, queer community, LGBTQ plus, or I am queer, is more inclusive, and instead of saying, well, like, I'm a part of the gay community. I don't identify as a gay man, so it's less inclusive because you're only talking to one population within a very wide population.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I think that a lot of people still think of the word queer as something that perhaps they shouldn't say. Maybe only people who are identify themselves within that LGBTQ community kind of have the right, if you will, to say that word. So how do you feel about that? Do you think that that's a misconception?
I definitely think it's a misconception. So if I identify as queer and someone who does not, identify as an ally or in the LGBTQ community, if they're, trying to empower me and are, I'm sharing, maybe it's a coworker, right? And they know my identity and they're like, yeah, you're just a queer person living their best life. Awesome. But if that's you're allowed to use that language. It's not something that is reserved for a specific identity to use. There's no because it is just an identifying term. There's a denotation to that term. There's a definition that comes out of it. Now, I mean, you can still use it as a pejorative,
right?
But you just shouldn't use pejoratives.
Sure. Right.
Okay, great.
Okay. And so now the plus.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
It's way more succinct to have the plus than to have LGBTQ, QIAAP, ...
Okay. So it's almost, there's more.
Yes.
So we're just going to put a plus.
Well, the Q, the queer really helps to pull all of those identities together. But what's hard is it still erases some of those more subtle identities. So, and I'll just give you an example of one. Asexuality. So that's one of the A's in LGBTQIAAP ... Asexuality is an identity that is not widely understood. So it has been getting more limelight lately because I think, after marriage equality passed in 2015, people, the general public have started to process identities, I think, and we're just going down the line of complication, right? So right now we're kind of stuck on trans, but I think that asexuality is coming down the pipeline. And it's hard for people because asexuality is a valid identity, but it doesn't have a spot high up on the LGBTQ acronym. So it gets lost, which is a shame. So really all I'm speaking to is it's a shame that some of those letters don't get more limelight, but they fall very nicely into that queer umbrella term.
Well, thanks a lot, Jess. That is all valuable information. I feel like we have a better understanding of what LGBTQ terms are and the definitions, and we'll come back and we'll kind of dive into the history.
Can I go to the sleepover?
I want you to promise me something. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, no thanks, not my thing.
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Welcome back to Guide to Feeling Better. We are here with Jess Link, and Jess is going over anything and everything LGBTQ. So we already gave the audience some terms and definitions, and now I would like to kind of jump into some of the history. As I had mentioned previously, people I think are more familiar with the G and the L, the gay and lesbian. But as you have told us with the definitions, the whole community that has changed. So can you kind of dive into maybe what things looked like prior to 2015?
Yeah.
And kind of bring us up to speed 2018.
Man, here we go. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Man, I just did it myself. Homosexual people, homosexuality, gays and lesbians have been around forever, right? So all the way back to one of the first textbooks, the Bible, it's a sin. Leviticus 18:22. I think I got it right.
I'm going to take your word for it.
Bam. It's always existed, right? So human beings have sexual urges. We're sexual beings. And it was pretty commonly vilified, but just because it's something that's not typical. It is atypical. And I'm going to botch a percentage right now, but it's no, and they've never done a census count on who identifies, but it's like 10 to 15% of the population identifies as a sexual minority or a LGBTQ person, so a gender minority either. It's not the majority. So people generally are scared of what they don't know, and if you're not identifying in that way, you might be scared of it. So it was vilified.
Sure.
Since the dawn of time. But, you know, looking into like more modern, I would say turn of the century, like Industrial Revolution, that after the arts and like liberal arts education became more prevalent in like middle class, books were more easily accessible. So like, and I'm serious, like Industrial Revolution, turn of the century, 1880 to like 1910, there was more of an idea of what homo romance or like homosexuality was, because, and this is one of my first understandings, because it was accepted for high society women to have romantic friendships with other women, and it wasn't vilified. I don't think that there was an understanding that they were sexually attracted, but there was like a homo romantic acceptance of that identity, right?
Okay. And was that brought about by the women themselves or by the male population?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of speculation. Human beings are relationship creators anyway, so you're going to create relationships with people.
Sure.
And then from the male perspective, I think it was eventually eroticized.
Okay.
So you'll start to see literature that reflects that, the lust more, but it was a literary, like accepted, like writing poems for like your friends that are women. That was like a homo-romantic, socially accepted idea or like a partnership. So that's my first understanding of like when it started to be accepted, even though it was homo-romantic and not homosexual. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
It does. So it's taking a female relationship and it's no longer platonic.
Yeah.
There's that sexual interest to it or a sexual aspect to it.
From someone's purview, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In popular culture, in like the golden age of film, and there's a movie, it's Shirley MacLaine, it's like 1950, someone's gonna, as they're watching it, just yell the name of the movie at the television. Can't wait.
There you go.
There's, in pop culture and film, started to reflect the homosexual angst, and it started in very small ways in characters like not necessarily identifying as homosexual, but characters that like in the text you know that they have that homosexual interest, but it's just a pining or it's alluded to, and they're distraught, and then it's tragic, and then they kill themselves and they die. Shirley MacLaine. Please, someone, as soon as you know it, just yell it out.
Right in.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, we'll get it eventually. But it was seen more in popular culture. That doesn't mean that it was accepted.
Right.
Homosexuality was still included in the DSM as a mental illness until 1987. You could be institutionalized for even being thought to have had a homosexual relationship. Institutionalized until 1987.
Wow.
So even if it was reflected, there's still huge stigma for any lesbian or gay person, because like you said, that's really other things that have existed. We just didn't have words for them.
Right. Okay. And now we have those words. And so I am wondering, do you think that we are better off because we have more defined, we have a better understanding. So we do have the words. And I guess that's kind of a no-brainer for you.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you are and what your opinion is, but I definitely think that with more language, with more of an empowered understanding of identity and people around you, the benefits are astronomical, and you can't measure I mean, I'm sure you can measure anything, but qualitatively, I can give you anecdotal evidence in my life as to how my life has gotten so much better, but to someone else, those same answers might still be negatives, because there is still very live and well stigma and shame for being a queer person or identifying as some sort of sexual minority.
Mm-hmm. So within the LGBTQ community, does discrimination exist? For instance, a gay man who may have a partner and he understands gay, he understands lesbian, but maybe doesn't have a good grasp for all of the other letters, definitions, whatever you want to call them.
Sure.
So do you see that there is some discrimination even within the LGBTQ community?
Yes. So, and I'm going to answer your question yes first, and then say that LGBTQ people get discriminated against all the time. Every single day. And you think like, oh, well, of course not. They're accepted now. Still happens. It permeates our culture, the way that we're raised, the way that I was raised, and I am a self-identifying human person as LGBTQ. Our language is discriminatory. The way that we talk, the way that we value masculinity. So if your son is in any slight way effeminate, you're going to call him a sissy. You're not going to, but you've heard that, right?
Yeah.
And that you might not be trying to be, you're still inflicting some sort of pain. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
So this discrimination, and discrimination is a term, like we could talk ad nauseum.
That could be a whole segment in and of itself.
Exactly. But even though LGBTQ people have rights, like the right to marry, they're still actively discriminated against because it's a marginalized population and people are scared of what they don't know. Within the population or within the community, there can be discrimination because still people are afraid of what they don't know. And at any turn, even if we are the most compassionate, empathetic, well-versed person, we all have the opportunity to be mean. You have to check yourself on it, educate yourself whenever you can, apologize, and move on.
Okay. And is it okay, this is kind of just throwing it in, is it okay to ask questions?
Yes.
Okay.
For me, it is okay to ask questions. I think that if you have a good intention, it's okay to ask questions.
Okay.
There are some questions that are just impolite to ask.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. So Katie Couric is a studied
journalist.
Perfect. I was going to say interviewing person.
Yes.
So thank you. Studied, well respected, well loved. She is a kind person, at least from what I've seen. And in an interview with Laverne Cox, an actor who plays Sophia on Orange is the New Black.
Yes.
The interview was about Laverne's acting career. It's okay that it is also about being transgender, but then Katie Couric asked about Laverne Cox's genitals.
And that's a no-no.
Would I ask you about your genitals?
No, you would not.
It's just, and some people are like, well, of course, that person's trans. Ask if they've gotten a surgery. You're literally asking someone about a private body part. You might want to ask, but don't.
But don't.
You might be curious, think about it in your own head, like, or what, and you're allowed to seek understanding. So people make mistakes, right? But just check yourself on any of your questions. Like, would I ask this question to someone I already respect? And everyone deserves respect, in my very humble opinion, but like, would you ask, I don't know, your grandma about that?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Katie Couric has since apologized.
I'm sure she did. I wouldn't expect anything less. So I think that's just a little bit of the history in regards to the LGBTQ community. And we'll take a little break. We'll come right back and we'll continue the conversation.
You may see yourself as a lot of things, but you will always be his dad. Please take control of your life and go to AA.
Welcome back to Guide to Feeling Better. We are here with Jess Link, and we have been diving into terms and definitions and the history of what exactly LGBTQ letters stand for. And so, why does that matter? Why do we need to have terms and definitions? Why do we need to know the history? Can you kind of give us some information? Why does it matter?
It matters because it's people. These are human people with desires or feelings or thoughts that are not wrong, that are not bad. They should not have to feel shame because they're just people. So if we allow someone to live fully and freely without fear of persecution because they're not doing anything wrong, they're going to be able to reach their full potential. And that's all anyone is ever asking for, is to be a person and not feel less than.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say that sounds easier said than done.
Yes.
And, you know, with this being Guide to Feeling Better and talking about mental health and addiction, the LGBTQ community has higher rates of addiction. Mm-hmm. And I am going to say that maybe someone who is trying to figure out how they identify, where they fit, not only within the general community, general society, but then also within this LGBTQ community, they may be experiencing some mental health issues, maybe not brought on by themselves, but perhaps brought on by other people, or, you know, just things that they are seeing within society, within our culture. And that can be a lot to deal with. Mm-hmm. And so I think that perhaps that's where the high rates of addiction kind of comes into play, and that mental health piece. So are you able to speak on that topic?
Yeah, it's stressful to be queer. It's stressful, not like every single second of every day, but and especially since marriage equality passed in 2015, the climate for LGBTQ people has gotten so much easier.
Okay.
It is very much easier for me to feel comfortable in a public setting than it was previous to 2015 when marriage equality was passed federally. Okay. And I have clarification on the statistic that you gave. Yeah. So you're right. LGBTQ people who identify do have higher rates of addiction, but it's not because they're gay. There are reasons, and you started to hit on that. So in 2015, there was a survey done, it's the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, Adults who identify as a sexual minority are twice as likely to have used an illicit substance in the past year. So twice as likely than, so homosexual people are twice as likely than heterosexual people. Okay. And let's dive into why. I can't tell, one person specifically. I'm not a substance abuse counselor by any means, but the understanding that I have on my identity, my experience, and the experience of the community is that historically we have been told that we are wrong. Pedophiles, sinners, going to hell, the gamut, right? It was, like I said, it was in the DSM, which stands for?
Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Perfect.
There we go.
Diagnostics, I'm never going to get it right. The
It's
DSM,
okay.
but we know what it is now. It's what
we do.
Professionals use to diagnose.
Correct.
And homosexuality was in the DSM until, like I said earlier, 1987. So this is something that people have feared, so they have ostracized, right? That affects the community, that affects yourself, right? That affects your self-esteem. So.
Yeah. Well, and we know that oftentimes people will turn to substances, excuse me, will turn to substances to kind of hide,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I was going to
go
say,
ahead.
Fun fact, though. So, yes, people when they're under stress might turn to a substance to numb that substance. But because sexual minorities have been so ostracized historically, they weren't allowed, or they weren't safe to be fully themselves in public, right? So if, say you had a partner and you were like closeted, you were stealth meaning you didn't let other people know, but you wanted to go out and enjoy yourself because you're a human being that wants to go out and enjoy yourself. There were gay clubs, right? But gay clubs are bars. So you have more exposure to substances. The likelihood of you developing an addiction is higher because the public spaces that you had access to safely were gay bars and clubs, which judgment-free zone, it's just you have more exposure to that substance.
Okay. It makes sense. It makes sense. If you are not feeling accepted in kind of general society, then you go where you are accepted, where you do feel comfortable, excuse me, and if that is a bar or club, drinking, smoking, lots of other things are taking place in those environments. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
that was some good information. So I think when we come back, we will talk about some resources here in the community, and then we'll kind of wrap up.
Growing up and separating from what's familiar to you can be scary. It can be even more difficult if you have a mental health challenge. You're trying to define yourself and your place in the world, which can be hard if you feel anxious or depressed. When one person reaches out to lend a hand, they can make all the difference. You could be the one to help them soar. Find out how you can help a young person with a mental health or substance abuse challenge. Visit samhsa.gov/children.
Again, welcome back. We are going to kind of wrap up this segment, and we're going to talk about some resources. So maybe think about perhaps resources that would be available not only just in Campbell County, Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati area, but then also maybe some national resources that people locally can access.
Sure. So as a community member, we'll start with where I live. I live in Campbell County, Kentucky, and there's not much.
Okay.
There's not a community center. Some cities have LGBTQ specific community centers, full places where people can go. There are classes. It's a full service community center, right?
Okay.
That used to exist in Cincinnati, actually. It is now since a digital resource. So you can go online. And now it's going to escape. the name will escape me, but it used to be located in Northside, a community in Cincinnati, but now since is, like I said, an online resource. And if you were to do a broad Google search in any, location geographically and do LGBTQ resources near me, your search engine is going to pop up the resources, right? So it populates on that list pretty high up. But that doesn't mean, because there isn't an identity-specific physical location to go to, that doesn't mean that there aren't resources out there. So at Northern Kentucky University, there is, and at very many universities, there are centers of inclusion that offer services for marginalized identities. And it goes all the way from counseling to mixers, dances, opportunities for you to socialize with other people that identify in a similar way that you do. So these resources, yes, it is at NKU specifically, but they do exist. What's really nice about being a part of a community is that you have power. You can come together and make a community, make a weekly coffee shop night, a designated meeting, a space, anything that you want to do that is centered around a cause, right? There are less people that I have found in Campbell County that identify, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. It just means that there isn't a set infrastructure for that community currently. A resource that and again, it is another digital resource. It's on Facebook. There's a community group called the Cincy Straddlers, and there's a website called autostraddle.com, and that's a community forum for LGBTQ people to consume pop culture, listicles, videos, find resources. But subgroups in major cities start to form in order to provide that community for identifying people. So Cincy Straddlers is something that I found on Facebook when I moved back to Cincinnati in 2013, and I would meet friends. I've made friends on that social forum. It's just Facebook. But then people would organize, like game nights or park meetups. One of my very favorite people, I had never met in person until like last month. And we met online, and it's just because we have, common interests or, like each other's posts, and you start to get to know someone because of their humor, what they're posting, then you invite them out to, hang out, and they're your friend. It's comfortable. So these resources exist, these grassroots resources, but someone has to create them. So Cincy Straddlers was something that was created locally from a national website, and it's been an amazing resource for me in the greater Cincinnati area.
And so probably everybody Googles everything, right? So like you said, put it in your Google search, and a group might come up, or even just information regarding like a certain topic or term, And there are more reputable sources than not. So just knowing, and that's something that we all have to be in charge of, is our tech literacy, if something is reputable or not. Another organization that just popped into my mind, and it's perfect for this conversation, is GLAST. So Gays and Lesbians Achieving Sobriety Together. It was formed just a couple of years ago. And it's a peer support group for LGBTQ people who are battling addiction and are in recovery. They have meetups, they've got events, sober events, and you can still have that LGBTQ community without a pressure to imbibe. And that is great, because we, as you may know, the Campbell County Drug-Free Alliance has actually partnered with GLAST and invited Martin and Richard out to a meeting, and they spoke about the services that they are providing in the community. And they're not only in the LGBTQ community, but the large Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati community. So they're doing amazing work. Jess, this really has been beneficial. I hope that everyone watching at home has learned a thing or two. Do you have any final thoughts? Maybe something that we, missed that you would like to just really kind of quickly kind of throw out there?
Yeah, and this could really go for anyone at any time. Check yourself first and foremost, and understand that people are people. So if at any time you're starting to question because of someone's identity, their validity or their goodness or their moral compass or standing, come at it from a place of they're a person that is trying to live fully and freely. Mm-hmm. What can I do to better understand them and free myself up from that shame as well? There is no shame in identifying as an LGBTQ person, and anybody trying to make you feel shame for that needs to check themselves. And it's okay. It happens. I'm not saying that it's okay, like I support that.
Right.
But we all have to check ourselves. Like I said, identify, and I still have to check myself daily on my own shame.
I think that's a perfect way to end the show. So thank you, Jess, for being our guest today and providing really valuable and important information, and and helping all of our audience to really get a better understanding of what that cluster of letters LGBTQ stand for. So thank you. And please stay tuned for the news.
Oh, hey, bud.
Oh.
Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
It's a school night. With Gary and Todd?
Yeah?
Not sure about those two. I've been meaning to ask you. This is tougher than I thought. Is there any drinking going on in this crowd?
No.
I hope not, because alcohol can lead you to say things and do things that you really wish you hadn't. Isn't this what you're supposed to say?
I know.
So if any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't. I'd do anything to keep you safe.
Okay, I will.
I hope this is working.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you.
Brian.
Yeah?
So start the conversation even before they're teenagers.
Good idea.
For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hello, I'm Kristen Arant with Mental Health America of Northern Kentucky and Southwest Ohio. We are your National Institute of Mental Health outreach partner. To keep with current-based mental and substance use news, link to the National Institute of Mental Health on the web, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Suicide accounted for nearly 45,000 deaths in the United States in 2016. Unfortunately, tools currently used to predict an individual's risk of suicide attempt or dying by suicide, such as brief self-report measures, have only moderate accuracy. Now, researchers have developed a new prediction model that substantially outperforms existing self-report tools. The study, supported by the National Institute of Mental Health, was published online May 24, 2018 in the American Journal of Psychiatry. Everyone feels stressed from time to time. While people often learn to deal with stress in a healthy, adaptive way, sometimes people respond to stress in a maladaptive way, which can put them at greater risk for developing mental illnesses. Now, a new study conducted by NIMH researchers has revealed more about the organization and function of a brain structure, paraventricular nucleus of the thalamus, that may serve a key role in linking stress detection to the development of adaptive behaviors. The study, published online June 18, 2018, appears in Nature Neuroscience. Targeted eHealth HIV intervention reduces STIs and sexual risk behaviors. New study shows promising results for the Keep It Up intervention. The U.S. National HIV and AIDS Strategy calls for reductions in new HIV infections by the year 2020, particularly among young men who have sex with men, YMSM. Although electronically delivered health services have been found to be an effective way to deliver HIV prevention information, very few interventions target YMSM. But new findings from a study funded by the NIMH and the National Institute on Drug Abuse suggest an electronically delivered HIV prevention intervention may be effective in reducing sexually transmitted infections and sexual risk behaviors in this group. To learn more, go to www.nimh.nih.gov. A new clinician screening tool is now available for substance use. The NIDA Clinical Trials Network has unveiled a new scientifically validated online screening tool designed to assess a patient's risk for substance misuse and substance use disorder and assist the healthcare provider with prevention and treatment strategies. The tobacco, alcohol, prescription medication, and other substance use tool is available on the NIDA MED web portal and consists of a comprehensive screening component followed by a brief assessment for those who screen positive. NIDA MED disseminates science-based resources to health professionals on the causes and consequences of drug use and addiction and advances in pain management. To learn more, visit www.drugabuse.gov. A study cast doubt on the effectiveness of e-cigs for smoking cessation. A study found no evidence that smokers who used e-cigarettes and other electronic nicotine delivery systems in the U.S. were more likely to quit smoking cigarettes than smokers who do not use these products. The study, looking at 2015 to 2016 data, found that 90% of people who used both ends and traditional cigarettes, dual users, were still smoking 1 year later. The research was conducted by the researchers at the School of Public Health at Georgia State University and funded by NIDA and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Center for Tobacco Products. This has been your Guide to Feeling Better news update. Remember, you can always learn more from our other Mental Health America YouTube videos and from reliable news sources like the National Institute of Mental Health and SAMHSA. Thank you so much for watching and have a mentally well day.
Unless you've walked in their shoes, you would never know the overwhelming feelings of sadness, anxiety, and hopelessness that cause hundreds of students to take their own lives.
The number of students we lose to suicide every year would fill an entire high school.
We need to start the conversation about good mental health.
Help us reverse attitudes and save lives.
The life that you save might be your own or someone you love.
To learn more, go to attitudesinreverse.org.
Our Guide to Feeling Better shows attempt to dispel myths and misconceptions about the ways in which people can and do recover from mental health and substance use disorders. We hope that today we have provided you with valuable information on LGBTQ issues and terms. We hope that this information will benefit you and those whom you love. Early intervention is a key to survival and recovery. We hope that you have grown today and that we've provided you with the necessary tools that can help save lives, perhaps even your own. For wellness checks, more practical information, and for topics that you would like us to address on future shows, please visit www.guidetofeelingbetter.org. Thank you.